with an abbreviated, shorter, but potent version of Broken Truth. I'm John Davidson, and we are live with Clinton Ohlers, our Clinton Ohlers, PhD, who was supposed to testify just a few minutes ago to the Wyoming Labor and Health Senate Committee, but somehow you got skipped. What happened, buddy?
Well, so we were up for Wyoming Bill HB 135. It's a very important bill to maintain the right of individuals to get directed donations and autologous donations, which means if you want to get blood, you should have the right, if you need a transfusion, to determine who gives you your blood. I mean, obviously, as long as they're a match and that kind of thing. But and that's what we do at Safe Blood, right? We match non-mRNA vaccinated blood donors with recipients of any type who want to receive non-mRNA vaccinated blood for transfusion. As awareness spreads of how dangerous the vaccine has been, and that these dangers can be transferred and have killed people just through blood transfusions, more and more people are looking for directed donations, or very wisely donating to themselves. You can donate a unit to yourself a month ahead of time through what's called autologous donation. And that's really important for, say, pregnant women who are about to deliver, right? Because they can bank their own blood. I mean, you can't bank a lot, but you can at least bank a unit. And that's a situation where if you had an emergency during delivery, you'd have some blood on hand, right? And then you wouldn't be forced to take what's off the shelf, which we don't know the exact safety profile of, but we do know that a lot of people have been injured. So that the spill would have protected. And yeah, we got the people speaking in favor of it got railroaded.
Yeah, that was a pretty shocking thing. I mean, we were covering, first of all, it was very interesting to hear the other bills that were being discussed in the same period of time. I mean, frankly, a lot of them should have had their own afternoon to be discussed, because the importance of, mask and vaccine status discrimination should have been it should not have been rushed, frankly. So do better next time, Wyoming Labor and Health Committee.
Yeah, and they had an important, another important bill up, I believe it was Bill 164, that was being discussed just before I was scheduled to come on, about the right to prescribe label at doctor's discretion. Like if you have safe drugs that can have cross-label use, you can do that. And the whole point of that was to obviously to make sure we don't have another situation like we did with COVID, where you had these cheap, inexpensive, highly effective drugs, like we talked about in epidemic of fraud, hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, I'm sorry, John, I just messed up the title of your movie, but
this is live, Clinton.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I'm live.
Several people are watching this.
Okay. So, but in epidemic of fraud, I mean, we covered what they had done so corruptly with hydroxychloroquine and of course with ivermectin. And so, and I remember we had a doctor in Pennsylvania who had prescribed ivermectin and then suddenly didn't, because the FDA was suppressing it. They were afraid to. So this bill would have prevented. It will prevent that if it passes. What was amazing, though, was to hear like a hospital administrator come up and testify, say, no, there's no reason for this. Administrators need control over their staff at the hospitals. And then he specifically, it was jaw-dropping, referred to hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin as the example. He said, for example, at first we tried hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and then we switched to remdesivir.
We switched to wholesome remdesivir.
Exactly. So we tried, and on top of it, the history about
it's like the breast milk of pharmaceutical companies.
And that wasn't the way it worked. They didn't try those two together and then go to remdesivir. Hydroxychloroquine was specifically suppressed so that they could say remdesivir was the only thing that worked. And then ivermectin showed up. So then they persecuted that. And they persecuted doctors who attempted to prescribe ivermectin, knowing it was the safest, cheapest, and most effective alternative. So the fact that this guy gets up and says that was just like, if that wasn't proof that the bill's necessary, I don't know what. I mean, he's actually a hostile witness, but he's exhibit A for the proponents of the bill.
So you were denied the ability to give your presentation. And I know that you probably practiced it. You were up late, worried about it, trying how you're going to get it right. Talking to the talking to the other people that were testifying about it. I mean, this is true. I'm being serious. Like, this is probably a big deal. It would be a big deal for me
because
to.
when you have to try to communicate the amount of time, scientific detail that I need to communicate in a window of 2 to 3 minutes, that it actually is a much more difficult project than it looks, because every word counts, and you have to still communicate without the number of words you normally would use. And what led up to this, it was extraordinary, because the bill was introduced, and then they went to the main blood bank in Montana and Wyoming. It's Vitalant. Okay. And they had a doctor from they had the CEO, I believe it was, of Vitalant testify. And then they had a doctor testify. And what the doctor said could easily have been refuted by anybody who is familiar with directed donations, autologous donations. And like, it was, okay, this is nonsense. I was planning on making some reference to rebut a couple of these things, which easily could be done. And then this was the shocking part. As soon as he's done, the chair of the committee says, well, there's no one else to testify, so that gives us a lot to think about. We'll need to reconsider some things.
Right.
Meeting adjourned.
Right.
Now, I've been sitting there for an hour and a half waiting to come on, and I'm sure that at least 3 or 4, if not more, other people were there to testify on behalf of this. So that really made me think, well, what's going on? I mean, is Vitalant, Vitalant charges exorbitant fees for this. So to give you an example, where the Red Cross might charge $100 to $125 per unit for directed donation, and some blood banks don't even charge any extra fee, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Vitalant will charge $500 to $800 per unit. So we had a member in Montana who needed 4 units, and that cost, that suddenly out of pocket, she had to pay $2,000, because Vitalant also won't work with your insurance company on this. They make you pay it up front, and then you can recoup it. So I don't know of any logistical reason why their prices would need to be so high. What they have is a monopoly in these states. But there's more to it, John, because we've seen that since July, it seems like the large blood banks have really been colluding, or collusion's the wrong word. But it's when everybody starts acting in concert, going the same direction at the same time to make something harder to get. There's a collusion, we don't know, but we know there must be some extrinsic thing that's causing a variety of responses, all to the same end of limiting directed donation. But why this bill was so important was what I was going to testify to, and I think that is what we can jump to.
Well, also, I just want to throw this out there to everybody watching. If you are watching, you have some questions for Clinton, post them in the chat. I think we're getting questions from YouTube and Twitter right now. Maybe Rumble. I'll check over at Rumble too. But why don't you give, your whole introduction, your background, and what you were going to say to the Wisconsin Senate committee, as if you were doing it live, and then we'll take some questions.
Yeah, well, okay. So this is, and again, it was Wyoming Bill HB 135, and here's the testimony that didn't occur. So I'm Clinton Ohlers, Vice President of the U.S. branch of Blood, which is in over 55 countries. I'm Executive Director of the Safe Blood Foundation. I hold my PhD from the University of Pennsylvania with focus on history of science. And my chief role at Safe Blood is to assess and communicate the science surrounding the dangers of COVID-19 vaccines for the blood supply and how to protect the public. I arrived in this work because of the prior work I'd done in scientific assessment of fraudulent scientific studies concerning COVID-19, which were covered quite excellently in the film Epidemic of Fraud. Now, what Safe Blood does to achieve and protect the public is by matching non-mRNA vaccinated blood donors with transfusion recipients, whether they're vaccinated or non-vaccinated. The recipient status doesn't matter. But I think we'll all agree that it's a fundamental right for a person to avoid something he or she believes is unsafe. But the question would be, can we even go further and say that these concerns about the blood supply are scientifically grounded? The answer to that is absolutely yes. I'm currently offering a peer-reviewed study with Dr. James Thorpe and Stephen Hatfill of the Advanced Biological Research Group, along with Safe Blood's founder, George Della Pietra in Switzerland. We are studying multiple cases here and internationally of individuals who had not received a COVID vaccine, yet after blood transfusions experienced injury or death from known adverse reactions to the vaccine. One of the most tragic of these was that of newborn baby Alex in Washington State. Alex died from a clot that began forming only hours after his transfusion. It started at the transfusion site in the knee, ultimately ran all the way up to his heart, was impervious to treatment, and eventually killed him. This is also a case that, like many others, where the injury was not known to be a blood transfusion reaction, but it is a widely known COVID-19 vaccine reaction. What's really so tragic about baby Alex and other people like 63-year-old Mrs. Esmer in the Netherlands and others is these people knew to be concerned, or the parents did. They tried to take simple, effective, inexpensive precautions to protect themselves or a loved one, and they were prevented. And the consequence of that was death. Historically, to choose your own blood or donate to yourself has been common and not controversial. That only changed recently with COVID-19 and the rollout of its vaccines. Since then, this ordinary medical freedom has been curtailed almost completely in Europe and increasingly in the United States. In the northwestern states such as Washington and Idaho, now in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio, as well as in parts of the Northeast and in Hawaii, it is becoming harder and harder, if not impossible, to get directed donations. The result is that patients in those states have been forced to shoulder additional hardships, to travel out of state, across the country, even across the Pacific, to get their medical procedures performed. Sometimes even children denied transfusions from their own parents. I have personally spoken with patients in Minnesota and Ohio who are not well enough to travel, who have their own donors ready and waiting to give, but instead have been put in the difficult position of either accepting blood they reasonably fear or doing without. I said in an interview recently, if baby Alex had had the good fortune of being born in Wyoming after and if this legislation passes rather than in Washington in 2022, he would almost certainly be alive and flourishing right now, and his parents would be filled with joy. How can we call ourselves a nation with true regard of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness if we allow such simple medical rights to be infringed? And that is my statement.
Well, I don't know how to impersonate senators from Wyoming, but it seems pretty solid. And you know, it was interesting that they had time to get the medical doctor for was it Vitalant?
Yeah, Vitalant.
Vitalant? Yeah, they had Vitalant's propagandist hematologist come on board, and he said all his stuff like, "Oh, this is totally irrelevant. Yeah, we shouldn't be doing this at all." But then Vitalant profits excessively from self-storage of blood. Correct?
Yeah, well, what was extraordinary is that he said a number of things that just aren't correct. Like he talked about the dangers of directed donation. They'll say, well, family members may be pressured to falsify their medical history in order to give you their blood, right? And of course, you know, this is ridiculous, and it's not. I mean, I'll tell you about falsification. I was in a fraternity shortly while I was in college, and we did a blood drive, and they lied about everything. They lied about their sexual activity. They lied about their drug use, and they lied about the fact that somebody in the house had hepatitis A who they were in contact with, right? Because they didn't want their blood drive spoiled. And it was the last guy in the blood drive who didn't want to give blood, who came and said, "Hey," one of the guys, and I wasn't part of this at all, right? But they came out and said, "Hey, I was around a guy with hepatitis A," and the nurses said, "Wait a second, you were? Who was it?" He said, "Oh, a guy in the house." And she said, "Well, then all you guys, like 40 of you, we're all around the same guy, correct?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, I guess so." And boom, they had to throw out all the blood. So you know, you want to talk about dishonesty and donating blood. I would certainly have much more confidence in a well-meaning friend, family member, or person from church than just something random, right? And I'm not saying that to impugn the safety of the blood supply, but rather this idea of red herring arguments that it's somehow more dangerous to get blood from somebody that you know and trust, or to give it to yourself than to actually get something straight off the shelves. And of course, that completely overlooks now things like the Yale study that show that spike protein among certain people can be circulating in their blood up to 2 years after they've received the vaccine. And the spike protein, of course, is the pathogenic part of the vaccine, of the COVID molecule that is what's harming so many people. Right.
Well,
So
yeah. And some people like Jicky Leaks and others online have pointed out there may be some issues with the Yale study. But
well, look,
the
okay, actually, let me one up you then.
Yeah.
No, let me one up you. Whatever there is with the Yale study, we know of people who have had it 3 years. Okay, so here's the problem: like until it comes out in a study, then it's not known to science. Now, everybody might know somebody who's had spike protein in their blood for 3 years. You could know 100 people like that. That's not going to make it science until it comes out in a study. Like science is literally blind to anything outside of the scientific publishing establishment, which was why it was so easy to game the entire system back in 2020 with fraudulent studies and abused peer review and all of that. Okay.
Well,
so,
we discussed this yesterday. And yesterday we posted the video of the interview that we did with Dr. Harvey Reish, also from Yale, where he discussed a lot of the issues with the journals, the studies that were conducted in hydroxychloroquine.
he had extraordinary insights to sample sizes and how they misuse that. And
and since the movie came out, we found out that Gates Foundation was involved in clinical trials for hydroxychloroquine, and their vaccine representatives were involved in hydroxychloroquine studies for closed and confidential relationships, is what they said in their emails. So as the system's rigged.
Well, it did seem that way, and was disconcerting to me, and maybe he simply misspoke, but to say that there was no one else waiting to testify, and so therefore the hearing was closed, I'm pretty certain I wasn't the only person waiting to testify, and it was clearly known I was there because I had been messaged by the person who was coordinating the hearing, right?
Yeah. Was that the guy with the double mask?
Yeah, really. Double masking.
I don't know if it was he had a contraption.
The mask could not have been bigger, right? Like any bigger,
it couldn't have been.
He would have had to put eye holes in or something.
In all fairness, he probably just couldn't see you through the mask.
No,
I mean it happens, Clinton.
It's happening right now. Okay,
yeah. Anyway, sorry, I got my screensaver kicked on. I guess I didn't.
Our masks all kicked up, and we couldn't see John.
Yeah, no, I should have masked clearly in here in this green screen studio. But anyway, this is. I'm glad we were able to get you on to talk about your testimony here because I was just a little amazed how quickly they rushed through the whole thing, and then they let the guy. Oh, and the guy from Vitalant, his previous pedigree or CV is University of Pennsylvania, is where he is educated. Red flag. Also,
well, that would have been interesting because you would have had two Penn grads testifying, against each other, basically.
Penn fight.
Yeah,
a pin fight. But no, it was also he was with Red Cross for 15 years or so before Vitalant. So
yeah, well, somebody was just texting me. One of our most erstwhile supporters, someone actually the wife of Bill Hynek, who we have actually. If you go to our website, you can see a brief story that will be posted in the next couple of days about his how he was injured and killed through a blood transfusion, and she immediately said, wow, something was really up with this interview or with this hearing. And she immediately started looking into Vitalant and their connections. And she says there's, they're taking a lot of money from HIS and there's connections with the Gates Foundation. So, it seems to be the lingering effects of the usual suspects.
Wait, Vitalant has a relationship with Gates Foundation?
That's what she said. So I have to double check it and confirm it. But just like this is not somebody who does sloppy research. Okay, you can usually trust. Or usually, I mean, I've always been able to trust information coming from her because she had to so meticulously document with a lawyer what was going on with her husband's injuries as he received unit after unit up to it was 22 transfusions over a 2-month period. In other words, his whole blood supply was replaced. And this was early on in the pandemic after the rollout of the vaccine. And what they did was they said, could all of these problems he's be getting be connected to the vaccine? So they went to VAERS, and in the VAERS reporting system, they found two amazing things. One is that so many of his issues that would happen immediately after a transfusion were also being reported as adverse reactions to the COVID-19 vaccines. And then they noticed that reports would disappear. Somebody was scrubbing the VAERS system as reports came in. And we also know that happened with the military reporting system. So, we're still in hopefully the tail end of just corruption layered upon corruption. And so when you see something happen like just happened today in Wyoming, you are left thinking, is this an honest mistake, or is the legislature there, in some way compromised through the influence of Vitalant or its larger connections or something else altogether?
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, sorry, that was the Wyoming one. And here's your lower fifth.
Hey, but good news, though, is we've also got, well, actually, this is important. There is 2 bills that are going forward in Kentucky. And they go even further than the Wyoming bill, not only to protect directed donation, but to start doing the testing and kinds of things that could eventually make blood available for emergency situations. Right now, not even I can get mRNA-free blood in an emergency, right? If I absolutely had to have blood in an emergency, I'd have to take it off the shelf or say, I'm just going to chance it. But Kentucky is starting to take measures there. And to show you the level of hostility against these things, the woman, Candace, her name is hard for me to pronounce off of my memory, but she's the main proponent of the bill. I am told by people working with her, she's received death threats. So now why you would be giving death threats over a bill to protect the right of people to get directed donations, which were completely non-controversial 5 years ago, something else is at play.
The whole thing is damn bizarre, Clinton, frankly. It's all been bizarre for like 5 years.
I know. Every post 2022 and all that, right?
It's like waking up every day in the Matrix, and you're just like, it's so obvious. Why are we having this conversation after 5 years? I'm like, geez, just protect us if we can't get through to people, can we just have a situation lets me take care of my family and you take care of your family?
Well, it's amazing because it's not only against the interests of people in these states like Wyoming or elsewhere, but Wyoming is in something of a medical freedom desert over there in the Pacific Northwest. We've had a member from Idaho had to travel all the way to Utah just to get his medical procedure with his directed donation. People in Washington State having to travel to Florida, to get medical procedures. Now in Minnesota, like a little girl with a heart needed heart surgery. She and her family had to go all the way. I think they went to Pennsylvania where they had family. We're talking about people taking extra expense to travel very far to do these things. And if Wyoming passes something like this, hey, would people rather go from Idaho to Pennsylvania or Florida, or would they rather just go over to Wyoming? I mean, it really actually could do good things for the, like I told them, I said, I'm in the Southeast, right? And our freedoms are still intact here. And we have a great blood provider in the Southeast called One Blood, which has been, just fantastic about directed donations. But I do make the decisions on what state I live in based on what medical freedoms would be allowed to my family. And if something down here, got taken away, certainly my sights would then be set on Wyoming, because I can basically work from anywhere. And I don't need to be in one particular state, or for that matter, in this country. And if it's not favorable, I'm out of here, right? But I would go where it is favorable.
How's California?
Yeah. of all places, California is still one of the freest in regards to this medical freedom. Yeah, which does shock everyone, because we tend to think
Absolutely.
of California so so controlled, but for some reason that the sort of liberalism of California has still been maintained in medical freedoms there. Texas is great, Florida's great, the Southeast is excellent. But in the Midwest, where you would expect Midwest values would have reigned, that the Midwest is becoming worse, and of course the Northeast is not great.
Well, the testimony today was really good, mostly okay, and then train wreck. But they did mention they may bring other people back for testimony, so
Yeah, well,
perhaps you'll get a second chance. Did you pay for the people there to be there?
Did I pay? No, we didn't pay anyone. Look,
Okay,
this isn't.
You were asked to testify for.
Yeah,
them.
I was asked. I was invited. So
Okay.
Who said that they might bring people back? I mean,
I believe the chairman of the Senate committee said something about that briefly in passing.
Okay, because what I heard him say is, well, we'll maybe have to consider this, reconsider this some more or something.
Yeah, they didn't really. It's very unfortunate that they denied testimony there.
It's hard for me to believe look, in the bill that preceded, they had multiple people in the hearing room. Then they had all sorts of people lined up online, right? Via Zoom. They had people in state and out of state via Zoom. And they went back and forth over how many people do we have waiting? Okay, we might have to drop off the people that are out of state. I mean, they had a close eye on it. And then suddenly with this bill, this is like, oh, well, there's nobody else there, so let's go. It just, it doesn't have the ring of truth to it. It could be a blunder, but we explain away so many things by saying they're just errors when they're not. So hopefully this turns out to be that. But
well, they did end it promptly at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I think, or was it 2 p.m.? I don't know what time it was where they were. 3 p.m. Mountain or whatever it is. So maybe they just had to,
Yeah, could be. Let's hope so. Let's assume the best. Look, the great thing
they seemed like they had their stuff together otherwise.
Yeah. The good thing about Wyoming is they've been bringing these bills forward. Wyoming has been up until just a second looking very favorable, like a place that really cares about its citizens. And certainly the testimony in favor of freedoms for off-label use, those were quite compelling. And it was so fascinating how the only people getting up against it were big corporate interests complaining about their freedom to control their employees. Like, this would be a freedom that's taken our freedom to control our employees, and our employees happen to be people with MDs that we don't have, and we need to control them with their prescribing. And
testifying on behalf of the hospitaliers is the monopoly man.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah, right.
And he's like lighting a cigar with $100 bill, and he goes, these doctors, they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
I was an administration person.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Okay. Well, good.
But anyway, anything else going on with you?
That's it for now. Well, look, this is one of the important things in this country right now. So we've got RFK Jr. in as for HHS, right? This was an enormous victory in November that I think I was not the least among the people who was stunned by it. I really thought we were going to see a return of the steal, and we didn't. And so there's real opportunity here, and there's real opportunity for people to get involved in their states. And I just don't think the tide is against this restriction of medical freedom and this corruption. So now's the time to keep pushing. This isn't something to let it, let's assume that the worst occurred in Wyoming and really there was an interest to just kill this legislation, and it was done by parliamentary tricks on the inside. Look, that's against the tide of where things are going. So everybody should stay encouraged, keep working. Let's assume the best for now, that there are well-meaning people working hard to do the best for the people, and let's keep pushing that, because it's the I mean, look at Doge, right? It is the corrupt actors who are on their back feet now and are off balance. And so let's keep pushing.
Yeah, you know, I have been thinking a lot. I see some people, and obviously they have injuries or they've lost someone or any of the myriad of lawfares that have been conducted by the previous administration and the deep state, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
They are all very impatient. How dare Trump not have solved all my problems in the first 30 days? I mean, when you think about when you start a new job somewhere, now it's not a new job for Trump, but it's new to this administration. He's got a new administration, a whole new process of people and Cash now just took office like Friday. Hegseth has been in 2 weeks. Tulsi just got in. Bobby just got in a week and a half ago, right? It takes a little time to make all your dreams come true, I would assume. And I'm guilty of being impatient because I want everything fixed that we've been fighting against for a couple of years. But we do probably need to acknowledge that there is there does need to be an amount of time granted to people to acclimate themselves to where the bathrooms are in their new offices. It's just the basics of starting a new position, especially if you're over $1 trillion agency or an intelligence agency or whatever else. I don't know how long it takes to get acclimated to something like that, but I know for me personally, it'd take a while. So yeah, there's long. I know they've been jumping in, and that's wonderful. And that was
administration was a whirlwind of
yeah, and it's fascinating to see how upset people get for really just logical things that should have been done a long time ago. They shouldn't. Well, logical things correcting things that should have never been done in the first place.
Like people over 200 years old who are still receiving Social Security. Like literally, there's people who died before Social Security was even created in 1930.
Well, Clinton now
and they're receiving, right? And that, or how about right?
Exactly. And they're probably voting, and that makes this a partisan issue. So please stop attacking those elderly Democrats.
You've got to reward those dead voters with their Social Security payments.
Some of them are Revolutionary War veterans. Frankly.
Well, look at the number of people. Well, that you could go back further. Yeah, Revolutionary War. Thank you. Yeah, I thought you meant Civil War. But or you go or look at the number of people. Like Musk said, well, we're gonna start by getting rid of employees who haven't answered their emails in like weeks, and then they found out that they actually have dead employees who have been receiving paychecks. I mean, this
dude. I heard stories.
You so can't make this up. I mean, this could have been a comedy. Like this literally could have been a version of The Office or Clerks or something, but for the government, where it's just so outlandish you can't even believe it. And then it turned out to not be fiction.
Well, you find out like in 2011, the Social Security Administration stopped taking death data from the states for their master death file, and then as part of that process, just removed 4 million dead people. Well, that seems like it's an opportunity to have 4 million people get paid Social Security Administration benefits.
Well, yeah,
on the down low.
Right. And the thing is that I don't think it's really as humorous, right? It could be a comedy, but the thing is where did that money go? Do we really?
It's a dark comedy.
Did that go to help some grifter have an easy life? My bet is it actually went to more destructive ends than just
there was
somebody.
Definitely, it was a right. 2020.
I think the best we should assume first that what this was money laundering to channel large numbers of funds out of the U.S. Treasury, basically out of the Commonwealth and into like very bad things. And if it turns out that, hey, it was just so Bubba could get a free paycheck, well, then we should be relieved.
Yeah, there was a Social Security employee in Colorado, 2023, convicted of inventing 11 children and collecting $300-something thousand.
Wow.
Or no, I'm sorry, 10 children. Didn't mean to misrepresent. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of I don't know why my screensaver keeps kicking in. It obviously wants me to shut this off.
It's the deep state, John.
Deep state is under my desk.
Well, how do they?
Well, I start hoping that these deep state guys run out of cash now that USAID ain't funding them no more. So
from what I heard, Soros is his not for profits are having a little trouble.
yeah, it's not good for them. It's
Yeah.
a crying shame. Well, a couple other stories I'm working on that I'll try to get to in the next couple of days. One is something called the Barn Evernet, which is the Child Protective Services in Norway. I've been working with this couple whose children were homeschooled, and they were officially registered as homeschool children. This will affect us both. And one day, the children, they were on a vacation. They rented a house for a month in Tinset, Norway. And some neighbor saw their children, who were 4 and 8, playing in the snow.
Wow.
And they called Child Protective Services because it was school hours. Child Protective Services took a peek, maybe spoke to the parents, and then that evening in the dead of night, they show up and they take the children. And this was in March of 2024. And the parents are not allowed to see the children, and it has been a year. They maybe have seen the children 2 or 3 times in supervised visits. And their attorney got back to me yesterday, and I'd sent her some questions, and essentially they've just decided to keep these children with no cause. They violated due process. This is a terrifying thing. But then you learn, after I did an interview with them in July, I thought, well, hopefully they'll get this solved. And now here we are going into a year of them without their children. It's not solved. And all these other families have seen my interview, and they're coming forward telling me similar stories.
Wow.
Norway has a human trafficking problem that is sponsored by the state. Apparently, 4% of all children in Norway, or almost 4% of all children in Norway. I thought it was just, homeschooled kids, but 4% of all of the children in the country are under some sort of control for Barn Evernet.
Wow, that's horrible.
It is horrible, and there's been movies made about it.
Norway is one of the countries we had considered living in after Hong Kong, right?
Take the R out. No way.
No way for Norway.
Well, because apparently one of the groups that is most heavily targeted are immigrant groups. So you can't spank children there. No corporal punishment of any kind, and they'll take the kids. Which is, how do you even define that, right? I mean, frankly, what it appears to be is people are running this agency who were never spanked.
Yeah. This is where Hong Kong was such a dream, because they realize the value of disciplining children, and they'll chew you out if your child is misbehaving, or if you need to be a little stern to get
strangers will spank your kid.
Yeah, I mean you'll get like applause, right? And so so living in Hong Kong was fantastic in that regard. But then like we saw these kinds of things in Chicago that you're describing, where CPS just takes kids, and in Pennsylvania. So when we were in a fairly liberal city in Pennsylvania, we knew people who doctors would use CPS against parents to try to get compliance with the PCR test. Now some of these, even CPS was like, this is ridiculous. But, there was an attitude. You get in these big democratic cities that are supposed to be liberal, but really what they are is self-righteous and judgmental. And they talk about other people believing conspiracy things. They believe the more ridiculous conspiracies that are possible. But, like we had neighbors, one neighbor said she was going to call CPS because she saw her kids out in the front yard, not knowing that my wife was watching them from the window. And then, or you had another person on like the neighborhood group saying, well, the reason people homeschool is so they can abuse their children and no one will know. You know, like the public schools are these bastions of safety. Give me a break. And so, but the thing is that cultural environment that it creates, you know, is not the kind of America we want to be creating. You realize very quickly that your neighbors are actually a danger to you. So, you know, my wife and I, you know, came to the conclusion very quickly that the clock was ticking on how long we were going to be, at least in that part of Pennsylvania, you know, or whether we were going to be shifting at least neighborhoods, because, you know, who wants to live around that? It makes no sense. And certainly you don't want to be paying your taxes into that.
Yeah, I mean, last night I was going through some of the videos and home movies and things like that the family had taken with the girls before they were removed forcibly. I mean, dude, there's a video of the mom screaming as they drive away with her kids. And the cops are holding her down.
Well,
It's crazy. It's crazy. But these children took equestrian classes repeatedly. They loved to play in the snow. They had all kinds of like regular adventures. They were always at parks. They were at other kids. They were at parties. Like they were well integrated and tons of music in their life too. It's shocking that these kids were taken, and their attorney said this is
The attorney said what?
The attorney just said that this is just a horrible lack of communication within the government and cowardice and not wanting to address their mistake. And the judges just continue to allow it. They don't even let the parents testify in their own behalf sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, this is worse than every parent's nightmare. I mean, this is a child's nightmare. People need to understand this is the worst thing that these children could possibly imagine having happened to them. Has happened to them for no reason. They did nothing wrong. They were playing in the snow and their lives have absolutely been shattered, and they will be recovering from this probably the rest of their lives. So yeah, anyone who doesn't speak out about this or be enraged about this or want to see the authorities in Norway brought to justice is in a way psychologically participating in the crime against these children. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, I've been honestly, I was just laying awake all night last night, angry about it. You know, Norway. I mean, like the place looks beautiful. I mean, the kids lived on farms. They had such a rich life. And now they're placed in child protective services that has a lower life expectancy than children outside of it. It's so bad they have a life expectancy decline by being under the care of the state.
Certainly.
So we're going to cover more of this and more of these stories from people tortured by Barn Evernet in the future. I mean, there are a lot of them reaching out to me now. It appears that they are in the process. Some of the families who got their kids back, they're trying to figure out a way to prosecute the people that took the kids.
And this is really important. This is a situation where, in my opinion, people from other countries, this is why it's so important that you're covering it, because people in Norway are going to be fearful to cover it. You know what they did to suppress, for example? Yeah. Right. But we're not under the jurisdiction of the Norwegian Stasi, okay, doing this stuff. And so we actually can help, you know, our friends and, you know, fellow people over there, you know, because I remember recently I learned about, you know, what really ended the truckers, that the truckers blockade in Canada. And it wasn't debanking them and freezing accounts. They were still going to fight. It was when Trudeau and his government came up with the bright idea that, hey, if you're participating in a truck blockade, right, then you must not be taking good care of your kids. You must be neglecting them. So then they threatened that they were going to start taking children away. And that's what dissolved it, from what I understand, because people said, well, look, it's not worth it now. I can sit out here in the cold for 5 weeks without pay if I need to fight for my freedoms, but I'm not going to sacrifice my kids to the government. So then that's why I say, I mean, I could see where Norwegians themselves would have a hard time making too many waves, because what does it take? Obviously,
Right.
it doesn't take anything for you to lose your kids.
Well, this is what the attorney said to me. She said this case has received no media attention in Norway, neither from the mainstream nor alternative outlets.
Mhm.
The primary reason is that most Norwegian journalists are reluctant to cover child welfare cases, a hesitancy I have confirmed by journalists from both spheres. Additionally, public discourse on welfare is marked by fear and avoidance, a sentiment that has intensified in recent years, particularly since March 2020, when COVID enabled an authoritarian takeover of most governments. She didn't add that. I added that part, but she added since March
Yeah.
2020. Now, she also said she has extensive experience handling child welfare cases, and this case is not unique, although it surpasses most she has encountered in its severity. It is a lengthy and complex case, yet one fundamental fact remains. There has never been any documented neglect towards the children, the very criterion required for child welfare intervention. Even in cases of concern, Norwegian law stipulates that support measures must be attempted first before authorities can resort to drastic actions. But they just took them. They just
Yeah.
yanked these kids, and I'm so angry about it because
I
it
mean,
is
this
such a
literally
terrible thing.
is Hitler-esque, okay? And I know we like it gets thrown around way too much talking about things like Hitler. But look, when the Germans were under the Nazis, I mean, what was the biggest thing you feared, right? That someone could barge in your door and imprison you or your family, right? And how did Stalin how did Hitler maintain such control that he modeled after Stalin? It was if you stepped out of line, it wasn't just you who was going to jail, it was you and your wife and your kids and your grandma, right? So that created total social control because there was no such thing as taking a personal risk. You know, if you took a
Yeah,
personal risk, you didn't take a personal risk, you took a risk that endangered your entire family and even potentially even larger relations than that. And that creates total control of a society. So to the
yeah.
Norwegians,
I,
they might think they're liberals, but the methods are Stalinistic.
they are, and it's so it's so unbelievable. I want to show you some of the video of this. The first issue with dealing with anything Norway related is that the language barrier is difficult, and even when you have a translation system like Google Translate or whatever else, it really sucks. So Norwegians try to speak English, and they're trying to use colloquialisms or whatever, and it doesn't come across right. It seems it's like they think they missed what we say and what they pick up on, and then what they return back to us is totally like the wrong thing. So I'm having to work with a lot of different AI systems to get more information. But this is I'm going to share this because it's so frustrating.
Jeg skal få stå her. Ja, du skal få stå. Ja. Men la meg stå i ro sånn at jeg klarer å filme. Prøv å le så bra dere kan.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
Just the translation takes the dog barking and thinks it's someone laughing and says ha ha ha. No one was laughing.
Okay, I thought that. That's just heartbreaking.
The cops are holding her down.
Always tell the truth when you get home.
Well, she means to tell the truth. Don't lie when they try to trick you into lying.
Yeah, right.
Look.
Yeah, the police, what criminals?
CPS leadership had even said that this didn't need to happen.
Yeah, but I mean, what are the police participating in this? Like, there at some level, there has to be personal responsibility.
Well,
I mean, I guess
there's none. This is an organization that is not regulated.
yeah, I guess they're just tools that do what they're told. But wow. I mean, I think that was one of the unfortunate things that did come out of COVID and all of this was looking around and seeing how many police were just
Listen.
oh.
Jeg vil gjerne ha navnet deres før dere drar. Får jeg ikke lov å vite
Snakke med hun
Jeg vil vite navn.
Snakk med leder, du. Det er hun
Ja,
som
men jeg vil vite navnet deres.
Ja, ja. Unnskyld meg. Du får snakke med lederen også.
Lederen?
Barnevernslederen.
Hun snakket med henne i sted, og hun sa det var ikke noe grunnlag. Hun sa det på telefon her.
Tok
So,
du bilnøkkelen min i
yeah.
sted?
So it's
Du legger bortføre barna dine.
Ja, det vet
Du har tatt dem ut av der de bor. Det er en bortføring.
Ja, det er rett. Altså, det er barnevernet
Ingen
som har
skal si at ikke det har blitt brukt makt her i dag, sant?
barnevern.
so, this goes on for about 15 minutes. What a terrible thing.
Yeah, I just
If making America great again is really our goal, what does that mean internationally? That means that we have to be an example, but we can also exert pressure on countries like Norway, either politically or diplomatically, or at the grassroots level. We don't travel there.
yeah.
Don't buy products from Norway until the country puts pressure.
Embargo. Yeah.
I mean, this is, and another thing that happens too is that they target Christians. They don't like children being taught about Christianity. So families have abducted their own children and escaped to Romania,
Yeah.
where they are granted asylum because Romania has a large Christian population and they don't put up with that crap.
Romania is actually looking very good right now. I mean, if you look at Tbilisi, their capital there, other than the suppression of this political candidate who should have rightly won the election, it was one of the, our election wasn't stolen, but many around the world were. But I think it goes to show, think of the underhandedness of coming and taking them at night. So they came when they knew that they would least expect it and least be able to defend or, and I think it goes to show, I mean, it makes me wonder what the legal advice would be for families who, but I would think is the moment somebody gets a whiff anywhere, Norway or elsewhere, that Child Protective Services might be calling. I think personally, I think families should have like to-go bags. I mean, we don't have any, but maybe, they should have to-go bags packed, and you get a whiff of Child Protective Services, you're in another jurisdiction faster than you can say.
Well, it's state-sponsored human trafficking, and apparently,
yeah, well, that's exactly.
Involved.
I mean, it's kidnapping. So, and it's not kidnapping that they feel very guilty about. I know of a family that had some similar things occur in England, right? So,
we can't even. We don't have enough time to get into.
We don't.
Crap right now. You can't even pray near an abortion clinic now. That's illegal. That's crazy. But this attorney has told me that in order to process this, the case has to go through all legal instances in Norway, along with the county board, and then appeal to district court, followed by court of appeal, and ultimately the Supreme Court. And then once the entire national legal system has been exhausted in Norway, then they can go to the ECHR, which is the European Court of Human Rights.
Mm-hmm.
And ECHR has reversed a few things that Norway's CPS has done. It's maybe one of the few instances of the European Union actually doing a positive thing that I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
So there's that. But that process, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
In which case, these kids have been raised in orphanages. By the way, they separated the kids. And they don't let the parents see them because they're afraid that the parents will kidnap them. Well, it's not like the parents work for Barnevernet.
Yeah.
Clinton, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day and meeting with me. I have to go.
Well, thanks for getting my testimony out there. We'll talk soon.
Well, somebody had to. Wyoming wasn't going to do it, so.
Okay.
You can know I'm your personal
I'll keep you posted
Wyoming.
if it's rescheduled.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
See you. Hang on a second. I'm going to do a really fun thing here. Stand by.